Shalom Aleichem. Welcome back, everybody, for our second episode of Judaism and Ecology. I'm joined here by my cousin Michael Kalati. And Michael, what are we going to be discussing today?
We're going to be discussing the Shmitta, the idea of the Shmitta Year.
Oh, wow.
I'd like to touch upon the idea of altering creation, like GM, genetically modified products.
Oh, wow.
We're going to talk
It's a hot
about
topic, that.
Yeah, it's a very modern topic.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the Tashchit, the prohibition of wasteful destruction, which is central to our studies here. And we're going to talk a little bit about trees and the and some Kabbalistic approach or Kabbalistic studies relating to trees.
Oh, wow, that's really that's something you hardly ever hear discussed, because trees are such a focal aspect of nature.
Yeah.
You know, and the comparison being to man, where they say man is the like a tree of the field, which hopefully I think you're going to be touching on that later.
Yes, I will.
So let's hear it.
Okay,
Let's
I'll start with the Shmitta Year. The idea of conservation is first mentioned and is first instituted in the Torah in Vayikra, chapter 25, verses 1 to 5, where I quote, "And the Lord spoke unto Moshe on Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When you come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years shall you sow your field, and 6 years shall you prune your vineyard, and gather in the produce thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath unto the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard." Basically, that which grows of itself of your harvest you shall not reap, and that the grapes of your undressed vine you shall not gather. It should be like a Shabbos year for the land, which makes a lot of sense, because the land needs to recuperate. Imagine if your basically your weeks went into weeks, like Friday went straight to Monday. So you didn't have a Shabbos to recuperate, relax, and sanctify the week. Imagine if life was one long week. This is what it is. This is what we've committed the planet to. It's one long week without Shabbos.
The same with animals, because they have the idea that we think Shabbat is just for us as Jews.
No,
but animals also have the concept of Shivita Behemta.
Yes.
While animals also rest on Shabbos. So why shouldn't the land?
Exactly. It's all a holistic. You must take a holistic approach. There's oneness to, all of these systems are all connected together. So Rambam, in his Guide to the Perplexed, he talks about the Shmitta Year, and I quote from Guide to the Perplexed, chapter 3, verse 39, "With regards to all the commandments that we have enumerated in laws concerning the sabbatical year and the Jubilee, some of them are meant to lead to pity and help for all men. As the text says in Shemot, chapter 23, verse 11, that the poor of the people may eat, and what they leave, the beasts of the field shall eat." And this is meant to make the earth more fertile and stronger through letting it fallow. In other words, one of the goals of ceasing all agricultural activity is to improve and strengthen the land. Another reason for the Shmitta Year, which emphasizes man's relationship with his environment, is suggested by the author of the Sefer HaChinuch in his explanation of the obligation to declare all produce ownerless during the Shmitta Year. To the reasons of the Shemitah Year, Rav Kook adds restoration of proper balance amongst man, God and nature. In the sabbatical year, according to Rav Kook, man returns to the freshness of his nature, to the point where there is no need to heal his illnesses. I'm quoting Rav Kook.
Right.
Most of which result from destruction of the balance of life as it departs ever further from the purity of spiritual and material nature. This is Rav Kook's introduction to Shabbat Haaretz, verses 8 to 9. This is to establish on our hearts and make a strong impression on our thoughts that the world was created as a new entity out of nothing, as it says in Shemot chapter 20 verse 11, that in 6 days God made heaven and the earth, and on the 7th day, when he created nothing, he decreed rest for himself, and therefore the Holy One commanded us to declare all produce of the earth ownerless during this Shmitta year, in addition to cessation of agricultural work. So the man will remember that the earth which yields its produce for him each year does not do so on its own strength or of itself, but rather there is one who is master over the land and its owners, and when he wishes, he commands that the produce be ownerless. It's worth noting that the last Shmitta year was observed, but it was observed in 1993-1994, which is corresponding to the Hebrew calendar year 5754. That was the last Shmitta year that was observed. You know, I wonder if people are calling for to start again. I wonder why it doesn't. It's not continued. Would it be hard to manage in modern society, a Shmitta year? It would take a little bit of doing, but perhaps this is what we need. This is what perhaps we're having problems, because we're not observing what Hashem commanded us to do. You know, moving on to another modern aspect of GM products, genetically modified foods. You know, today, because of the hardship of the climate, farmers are looking to bolster their produce by genetically modifying their fruits and vegetables and various other wheat in particular, to make it bigger, more bountiful harvests and more hardy against ever-changing climates. So Rabbi Avraham Ibn Ezra, with his explanation of the biblical prohibition against mixing species, he says from Vayikra chapter 19 verse 19, it says, "You shall keep my statutes. You shall not let your cattle gender with a diverse kind. You shall not sow your field with 2 kinds of seeds. Neither shall there come upon you a garment of 2 kinds of stuff mingled together."
That's kilayim.
Yeah. Now this is a very interesting thing, genetic modification. I don't have the answers, but what I do know about the particular new innovative scientific developments is that they are trying to perhaps look at genetically modifying trees that are able to sequester, to pull down CO2 from the atmosphere. So in other words, they're not trying to create a new species, but they're trying to magnify certain aspects of the tree's strength. They're trying to strengthen the tree's ability to pull out noxious carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So I wonder where that sits with halachically. What ruling can we consider regarding that? Is it something that should not be done, or is it something that should be done in regard to Pekiyach Nefesh? Because perhaps you know, we have a responsibility also there.
I wonder if there's any issue involved. I mean, again, I'm speaking it's way out of my knowledge base, but it's not as if you're fundamentally changing the function of the tree. It's just that you're, like you said, you're bolstering, you're enhancing what the tree does anyway. You know, so that's akin to, I suppose, an animal that doesn't do well on a certain diet, and you change the diet to make him stronger and healthier and more capable of being attached to a plough or whatever. So I wonder if there's any issue at all with that.
Well, it's interesting. Ramban Nachmanides, he talks about this about Vayikra chapter 19 verse 19. He talks about the idea of preventing changes in creation finds expression in an effort to avoid causing the extinction of any animal. So in other words, it's not, perhaps GM modification would not fall under things, because you're not going to make trees extinct by enhancing their sequestering abilities. Ramban writes in his Taryag Mitzvot Hayotzim Atzeret Dibrot, from his Kitvei Ramban, he I quote, "The reason for the prohibition against mixing species is that God created all the species of the earth and gave them the power to reproduce so that their species could exist forever, for as long as He wishes the world to exist. And He created for each one the capacity to reproduce its own species and not change it forever. And this is the reason for reproduction amongst animals, to maintain the species. So too among humans. It is for the purpose of being fruitful and multiply."
Yeah. It's the first mitzvah in the Torah. Peru, uruvu, milot haaretz.
Exactly. We find another mandate, bal tashchit, the prohibition of wasteful destruction. This is an additional expression of man's obligation to preserve his natural environments. It's found in the commandment against wasteful destruction, bal tashchit. In general, the commandment prohibits destruction of anything from which humans may benefit. It applies to the destruction of animals, plants, and even inanimate objects. We find instructive remarks in the Sefer HaChinuch, where he discusses the prohibition against cutting down fruit-bearing trees. The author discusses starts with the discourse on the scope of the commandments, and I quote, "We have been prevented from cutting down trees when we lay siege to a city in order to press and bring pain to the heart of its residents. As it said, you shall not destroy the trees thereof, and you shall not cut them down." This is from Devarim chapter 20 verse 19. Included in this prohibition is the destruction of every type, such as burning or tearing a garment or breaking a vessel for no reason. This is from Sefer HaChinuch, relating to commandment number 529.
Wow. Okay. So that sounds like it's kilkul. So you can have the idea of taking advantage of the environment, because Hashem gave us the environment for us, but to just willfully abuse the environment for no purpose whatsoever, I can't think of anything worse than that we can do with Hashem's world. Just destroy it willfully.
The author of this Sefer HaChinuch also goes on to explain exactly what you're saying, and he says the reason for the prohibition, and I quote, "It is known that this commandment is meant to teach us to love the good and the useful and to cling to them. In this way, goodness will cling to us, and we will avoid all that is bad and decadent. And this is the way of the pious, the tzaddik. They love peace and rejoice in the good fortune of others, and bring everyone near the Torah, and do not waste even a mustard seed. And they are pained by all the destruction and waste that they see, and they save anything that they can from destruction with all their might. But the wicked are different. They are the allies of those who destroy. They rejoice in destruction of the world, and they destroy themselves." And he brings the Mishnah Sota, chapter 1, verse 7, "With the kind of measure a man measures, so shall he be measured."
Right.
As a man, so shall you reap.
Yeah. Exactly. Wow, that's incredible. So, to me, from what you said, it's a simple choice. You want to be on the side of the tzaddikim, or you want to be on the side of the Rosha'im. The Rosha'im are the one who ally themselves to destructive forces. So it's a simple cheshbon, simple calculation we need to make. So, Michael, thank you very much for sharing that with us. Is there anything you want to add on there?
Well, yeah, there's various from Devarim chapter 20 verse 19. Among the laws of waging war, we find, if I may quote, "When you shall besiege a city for a long time, and making war against it to take it, you shall not destroy the trees thereof by wielding an axe against them. For you may eat of them, but you shall not cut them down. For is the tree of the field man, that it should be besieged by you?" In other words, the trees are an innocent party, and so why destroy them? You're waging war. Why destroy trees as well? They provide so much for you. It's incredible what trees do in service of us. So you plan a war, which is again a bad thing in itself. You want to destroy the trees as well. What are you doing? It's interesting because the Rav Yaakov Zvi Mecklenburg, who the author of HaKetav HaKabbalah explains the prohibition in it says it is not proper to use some created thing for a purpose diametrically opposed to the purpose for which it was created, as has been stated concerning Shemot chapter 20 verse 22, and he quotes, "For if you lift up your sword to it, you have profaned it." End quote. The altar was created to prolong the life of man, and iron was created to shorten the life of man. Thus it is not fitting that something which shortens man's life be used upon that which lengthens it. Wow. So the iron acts against the wood of a tree. So too a tree which was created to make fruit to nourish men and animals should have nothing done to it that destroys man. And also you have little something you can relate that also to cooking a kid in its mother's milk.
Yeah.
There's the diametrically opposed ideas. The milk is a life-giving substance, and you are killing it with a life-giving substance. It's a similar echo. It's echoes of that.
Such an interesting concept there.
And like you mentioned earlier, the relationship of God, man, and nature is depicted in the Torah expression, "For man is a tree of the fields." This various interpretations have been given to this relationship. Even plants are subject to divine providence. Both man and the tree are God's creatures. In Shifrei 203, it asserts this shows that man's living comes from trees. In fact, in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, chapter 34, the sages also compare the death of a tree to the departure of a man's soul from his body. And I quote from Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, "There are 5 sounds that go from one end of the world to the other, though they are inaudible. When people cut down the wood of a tree that yields fruit, its cry goes from one end of the world to the other.
Oh my God!
And the sound is inaudible. When the soul departs from the body, the cry goes forth from one end of the world to the other, and the sound is inaudible." On the basis of this passage, Rav Menachem Recanati, who was a famous Italian Kabbalist who was active at the end of the 13th century, the beginning of the 14th century, comments that when man wreaks destruction in the material world, destruction is wreaked in the metaphysical world as well, and that this is what is meant by "for a man is a tree of the field." So this is very important. He's saying that there were octaves between our destruction, or symmetries between our destruction of trees on our planet, than also metaphysical world above. God forbids that our destruction of trees is somehow damaging Shomrei. But this is what he's suggesting, is that the octaves and symmetries are there, and it's very interesting.
Very good. Oh, that's a real eye opener there. Thank you so much, Michael. I bet you'll never think about trees in the same way now that you've heard that from Michael. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And so we hope to see you next week, when we're going to be discussing more about similar topics. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful and blessed week. See you then.